Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Today, we're going on a pretty fascinating journey, I think, through the world of syphilis. It's a disease that has really challenged, our understanding of medicine for centuries. And as a medical microbiologist, firsthand how this ancient foe continues to pose challenges in the modern era.
It's true. Syphilis is a master adapter. It's a disease that has shaped history and continues to kind of intrigue us, with its complexities.
Yeah. We've got a collection of sources kind of to guide our exploration today. We'll be using MicroBwiki to kind of delve into the intricacies of Treponema pallidum. We'll also be using the CDC's vast database for the latest epidemiological trends and treatment guidelines. And for a touch of visual inspiration, we're going to be using Microbe Canvas to appreciate the microscopic beauty of this remarkable bacterium.
That's a great lineup. MicroBwiki will give us that foundational understanding of the bacterium's biology. And then the CDC provides, that crucial clinical and public health perspective. And then Microbe Canvas, well, that's where science meets art, right? It allows us to see the unseen world in a whole new light.
Exactly. So let's start with the basics. What makes Treponema pallidum such a formidable adversary? I'm particularly interested in its ability to evade the immune system. It's like a stealth fighter in the microbial world.
It's remarkable, isn't it? Treponema pallidum has a unique outer membrane, unlike many other bacteria we encounter. It lacks lipopolysaccharide, which is a common trigger for, our immune responses.
So it's basically flying under the radar, avoiding detection by our immune cells.
Precisely. And as if that wasn't enough, it has a very limited repertoire of surface proteins, which makes it even harder for our immune system to recognize and mount an effective defense.
It's like it's wearing an invisibility cloak. It's a truly stealthy pathogen. And to make matters worse, I remember reading that it can even coat itself with host proteins.
That's right. It's a brilliant strategy for evading immune surveillance. By camouflaging itself with our own proteins, Treponema pallidum effectively blends into the background. It makes it nearly invisible to our immune system.
It's incredible how this bacterium has evolved such sophisticated strategies for survival. No wonder it's been so successful at persisting in human populations for centuries.
And that ability to adapt and evolve is precisely what makes it such a challenge to treat and control.
Absolutely. Speaking of challenges, let's talk about the various stages of syphilis. As you know, it progresses through primary, secondary, latent, and tertiary stages, each with its own unique set of symptoms and challenges.
From a clinical perspective, the diversity of presentations can make diagnosis tricky, particularly in the early stages. The primary chancre, for instance, can be quite subtle and even appear in atypical locations.
It's true. And that brings up a crucial point for any medical microbiologist. Diagnosis isn't always straightforward based on clinical presentation alone. We rely on lab tests to confirm the presence of Treponema pallidum.
Absolutely. Dark field microscopy, while not always readily available, can be invaluable for visualizing those characteristic spirochetes directly from a lesion. And of course, serological tests, both treponemal and non-treponemal, are our mainstay for diagnosis.
Right. But those tests can't differentiate between the stages of infection, can they? That seems like it could complicate treatment decisions.
It definitely underscores the importance of a thorough clinical history and careful examination. We need to consider the entire picture to accurately stage the disease and tailor the treatment accordingly.
So tell me about secondary syphilis. What are the key features that distinguish it from primary syphilis?
Well, in secondary syphilis, we see a wider dissemination of the infection, often involving the skin, mucous membranes, and lymph nodes.
Right. I remember learning about this in medical school. The rash can be pretty distinctive with those reddish-pink, non-itchy lesions that could appear all over the body.
It's true, and the diversity of presentations is pretty remarkable. You might see macular, papular, pustular, or even nodular lesions. And let's not forget about condylomalatum, those flat, wart-like lesions that can appear on mucous membranes.
It sounds pretty unpleasant, to say the least. And I imagine those lesions are highly infectious, given the systemic spread of the bacteria at this stage.
Absolutely. Secondary syphilis is a highly contagious stage. Contact with those lesions can readily transmit the infection. It's a critical point for public health interventions.
Okay. So we've got this systemic spread of infection in secondary syphilis. But then, as I recall, things quiet down a bit. It enters a latent phase.
Right. The latent stage can be quite deceptive. While symptoms may disappear, the infection is still present, lurking beneath the surface.
Like a smoldering ember, ready to reignite at any moment. And if left untreated, it can progress to the tertiary stage, which, as we know, can have devastating consequences.
Yes. Tertiary syphilis is a stark reminder of the destructive power of this disease. It can manifest in a variety of ways, from gummatous lesions that erode tissues to neurosyphilis that attacks the central nervous system.
It's a sobering thought, and it really highlights the importance of early detection and treatment. But before we move on to treatment, I want to touch on congenital syphilis. It's a particularly tragic consequence of this infection.
It's heartbreaking, isn't it? The impact on newborns can be devastating, leading to a range of congenital deformities and developmental problems.
And I imagine that diagnosing congenital syphilis can be quite challenging, especially in those cases where symptoms aren't immediately apparent.
It's true. We rely heavily on maternal serology during pregnancy, and even then, it's not always a guarantee of detecting infection in the newborn. It's a constant reminder of the importance of comprehensive prenatal care and screening programs.
It really underscores the interconnectedness of maternal and child health and the need for a holistic approach to infectious disease control. Now let's shift gears and talk about treatment. The history of syphilis treatment is a fascinating journey in itself, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. From the use of mercury to the discovery of penicillin, it's a testament to the ingenuity and perseverance of scientists in the face of a formidable foe.
It's true. And as medical microbiologists, we know that the story of treatment is never truly finished, especially with the looming threat of antibiotic resistance.
Exactly. We've grown accustomed to the efficacy of penicillin in treating syphilis, but Treponema pallidum has shown us time and again that it's capable of adapting and developing resistance.
That's a sobering thought. What are the implications of penicillin resistance in syphilis, and how are we addressing this challenge?
Well, the most immediate concern is treatment failure. If penicillin is no longer effective, we need alternative antibiotics to rely on. The CDC has been proactive in this regard, recommending alternative regimens for those with penicillin allergies and monitoring resistance patterns closely.
That's reassuring. So what are the go-to alternatives when penicillin isn't an option? I know doxycycline and tetracycline are often mentioned, but are there any nuances to their use in syphilis treatment?
Yes. Both doxycycline and tetracycline can be effective, but the treatment duration is longer compared to penicillin. And of course, we need to be mindful of potential side effects and contraindications, especially in pregnant women.
Of course. It's a delicate balance, weighing the benefits of treatment against potential risks. And what about neurosyphilis? Is that treated differently?
It is. Neurosyphilis typically requires intravenous penicillin, often at higher doses and for a longer duration. Ceftriaxone is another option, but again, treatment considerations need to be individualized based on the patient's specific circumstances.
It's a reminder that treating syphilis isn't always as simple as a single shot of penicillin. It requires careful clinical judgment and a deep understanding of the disease's nuances. And speaking of nuances, there's that interesting phenomenon known as the Jarisch-Herxheimer reaction. What can you tell me about that?
It's a fascinating immune response that can occur within the first 24 hours of antibiotic treatment. Essentially, it's an inflammatory reaction triggered by the rapid death of Treponema pallidum.
So it's not a sign of treatment failure or an allergic reaction?
No, it's actually thought to be a sign that the treatment is working, killing the bacteria and releasing their components, which trigger the immune response.
Interesting. So it's more of a side effect of a successful treatment, not a cause for alarm.
Exactly. Although it can be uncomfortable with symptoms like fever, chills, and headache, it typically resolves on its own within a day or two.
Good to know. Now, shifting gears to the present day, what's the current state of syphilis globally? I know the CDC has been tracking epidemiological trends and working to control the spread of this disease.
Unfortunately, despite the availability of effective treatments, syphilis is experiencing a resurgence globally. The CDC has reported a significant increase in cases over the past 2 decades, a trend that's mirrored in many parts of the world.
That's concerning. What's driving this resurgence? Is it behavioral factors, changes in the bacteria itself, or a combination of both?
It's likely a complex interplay of factors. Changes in sexual behavior, like decreased condom use and increased numbers of sexual partners, certainly play a role. And there's also the issue of drug use, which can increase risky sexual behavior.
Right, and those factors can create a perfect storm for the spread of sexually transmitted infections like syphilis. What about the bacteria itself? Has Treponema pallidum evolved in ways that make it more transmissible or virulent?
That's an active area of research. While we haven't identified specific genetic changes that directly correlate with increased transmissibility or virulence, the bacteria's ability to adapt and develop antibiotic resistance suggests that it's constantly evolving.
So it's a moving target. a constant reminder that we need to stay vigilant and adapt our strategies as the bacteria evolves. Now, amid this resurgence, are there any bright spots? Are there any success stories that offer hope in the fight against syphilis?
Absolutely. Cuba, for instance, has achieved remarkable success in eliminating mother-to-child transmission of syphilis. Their comprehensive prenatal care and screening programs serve as a model for other countries to emulate.
That's inspiring. It shows that with dedicated effort and effective public health measures, we can make significant progress in controlling this disease. Now, before we move on, I want to circle back to our discussion of Treponema pallidum's unique biology. I remember being struck by those stunning images on microbe canvas, which really brought the bacterium to life.
Yes, Microbe Canvas is a fantastic resource for visualizing the microbial world. Those electron micrographs of Treponema pallidum are mesmerizing, showcasing its delicate spiral shape and intricate structure. And those artistic renderings. They capture the bacterium's ethereal beauty, its sinuous movement through tissues.
It's amazing how art and science can come together to illuminate the hidden world of microbes. Those images really help me appreciate the complexity and, dare I say, the elegance of Treponema pallidum.
It's a reminder that even the smallest organisms can possess a remarkable beauty and complexity that we're only beginning to understand. And that understanding is crucial for developing effective strategies to combat the diseases they cause.
Well said. Now let's delve into another fascinating aspect of syphilis, its historical context. This disease has left an indelible mark on human history, shaping societies, influencing culture, and inspiring countless works of art and literature.
It's true. From the infamous outbreak in Naples in 1494 to the stigma and fear that surrounded the disease for centuries, syphilis has woven its way into the fabric of human experience.
It's a story of scientific discovery, societal change, and the enduring human spirit in the face of adversity. And as we grapple with the resurgence of syphilis in the modern era, it's worth reflecting on the lessons we can learn from the past.
Absolutely. And understand this, rich history. We'll be drawing insights from historical accounts, medical texts, and even artistic representations of syphilis throughout the ages.
Perfect. It's going to be a fascinating journey back in time, so let's rewind the clock and explore the origins of this intriguing and rather notorious disease.
Okay, so let's start with the Columbian hypothesis.
Right. This is the prevailing theory, isn't it? That syphilis was brought back to Europe from the Americas by Christopher Columbus and his crew.
Exactly. The hypothesis suggests that syphilis was endemic in the New World and was then transmitted to Europeans through sexual contact with indigenous populations.
It's a compelling theory, but is there conclusive evidence to support it? I know there's been some debate among historians and scientists about the origins of syphilis.
Well, the evidence is largely circumstantial, but it's pretty persuasive. Skeletal remains from the pre-Columbian era in the Americas show signs of syphilis. And the timing of the first major syphilis outbreak in Europe, shortly after Columbus's return, lends further credence to the theory.
So it's like a historical detective story. We're piecing together clues from the past to try and understand the origins of this elusive disease.
Exactly. And while there's always room for debate and reinterpretation of historical evidence, the Columbian hypothesis remains the most widely accepted explanation for the introduction of syphilis to Europe.
Okay, so let's fast forward to the late 15th century. Syphilis makes its dramatic debut in Europe, right?
Right. In 1494 or 1495, depending on the source, a major syphilis outbreak struck Naples, Italy. It was a devastating epidemic that quickly spread across Europe.
And it was during this time that the disease acquired its infamous nickname, the French disease. Why was that?
Well, the French were involved in a military campaign in Naples at the time of the outbreak. So naturally, their enemies, the Italians, blamed them for bringing the disease.
Ah, so it was a case of wartime propaganda and scapegoating.
Precisely. The name stuck. And for centuries, syphilis was known by various nationalistic epithets, depending on who was blaming whom.
It's fascinating how a disease could become so entangled with political rivalries and national identities.
Absolutely. Syphilis became a weapon of sorts, a way to demonize one's enemies and absolve oneself of responsibility.
So, how did syphilis eventually get its current name? I'm guessing it wasn't a sudden shift in public perception or a scientific breakthrough.
You're right. It actually came from a poem. In 1530, the Italian physician and poet Girolamo Fracastoro wrote a poem called Syphilis Syphi Morbis Gallicus.
Syphilis of the French disease. Okay. What was the poem about?
It told the story of a shepherd named Syphilis who was punished by the god Apollo with a terrible disease for his arrogance.
So it was an allegory.
Yes. And Fracastoria's poem was so popular and so well written that the name syphilis eventually replaced all the other nationalistic epithets, and the disease became known as syphilis.
It's amazing how a literary work could have such a lasting impact on medical terminology.
It is. And it speaks to the power of storytelling and the way in which diseases have captivated the human imagination throughout history.
So we've got this new name for the disease, but treatment was still centuries away. What was life like for people living with syphilis before the advent of effective therapies?
It was a grim reality. Syphilis was a source of immense suffering and stigma.
Right. I imagine the symptoms of syphilis were terrifying, especially in the later stages when it could affect the brain, heart, and bones.
Absolutely. And there were no effective treatments. People often turned to folk remedies, quack doctors, and even dangerous practices like bloodletting.
And the social stigma. It must have been incredibly isolating and devastating for individuals and families.
It was. Syphilis was often associated with sexual promiscuity and moral decay, further marginalizing those afflicted with the disease.
It's a stark reminder that diseases are not just biological entities. They carry social and cultural meanings that shape our understanding of them and our response to them.
Precisely. And those meanings can have a profound impact on the lives of those living with the disease, often leading to fear, discrimination, and social isolation.
So before we move on to the more modern era, I want to touch on one more aspect of syphilis's impact: art and literature. This disease seems to have had a peculiar hold on the creative imagination, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Syphilis has been a recurring theme in art, literature, and music for centuries.
Why do you think that is? Why has syphilis captured the attention of artists and writers in such a profound way?
I think it's partly because of the disease's dramatic symptoms, its association with sexuality and morality, and its devastating consequences.
Right. It's like a tragic hero in a Greek play, this disease that can bring down even the most powerful and revered figures.
Exactly. And that makes for compelling storytelling. From Shakespeare to Beethoven, countless artists have explored the themes of love, loss, and mortality through the lens of syphilis.
It's a reminder that diseases are not just scientific facts. They're part of the human experience. They shape our stories, our art, and our understanding of ourselves.
Well said. And as we delve further into the history of syphilis, we'll see how this disease has woven itself into the fabric of our culture, shaping our perceptions of health, morality, and the human condition.
Okay, so we've laid the groundwork for our exploration of syphilis, from its microbial origins to its early impact on European society and culture. Now let's move into the 20th century, a pivotal era in the history of medicine and the fight against infectious diseases.
This is where we see dramatic shifts in our understanding of syphilis, the development of effective treatments, and the rise of public health campaigns to control the spread of the disease.
Right. The 20th century was a time of both triumph and tragedy in the story of syphilis. And as medical microbiologists, we can appreciate the scientific breakthroughs and the enduring challenges that this disease continues to pose in the modern era.
Absolutely. And as we explore this next chapter in the history of syphilis, we'll see how scientific advancements, social changes, and ethical considerations have shaped our approach to this complex and ever-evolving disease.
So let's turn the page and delve into the 20th century, where the fight against syphilis takes on a whole new dimension.
The 20th century started off with a bang. You could say in 1905, two German scientists, Schodin and Hoffmann, they finally identified the causative agent of syphilis, Treponema pallidum.
Right. That was a landmark discovery. It finally gave scientists a target, something to focus on in their efforts to develop effective treatments and control measures.
Exactly. And just 5 years later, in 1910, Paul Ehrlich, another German scientist, discovered the first effective treatment for syphilis, a drug called salvarsan.
Wow, that was a major breakthrough. Salvarsan, also known as arsphenamine, was an arsenical compound. It wasn't perfect, but it was a huge step forward from the previous treatments, which were often ineffective and even dangerous.
It was a game changer. It marked the beginning of the chemotherapeutic era, the idea that we could use chemicals to target and kill specific microbes within the body.
It's a concept that we take for granted today, but back then, it was revolutionary. And salvarsan, despite its side effects, offered hope to millions of people suffering from syphilis.
It did. But the real turning point came a few decades later with the discovery of penicillin.
Ah, penicillin, the wonder drug of the 20th century. It transformed the treatment of bacterial infections, including syphilis.
Exactly. In the 1940s, penicillin became widely available. and it proved to be remarkably effective against Treponema pallidum with fewer side effects than salvarsan.
It was a medical miracle. Syphilis, once a feared and often fatal disease, became treatable and curable with a course of penicillin injections.
It was a major public health victory, and it led to a dramatic decline in syphilis cases in many parts of the world.
But as we've discussed, that victory was short-lived. Syphilis is making a comeback.
It is, unfortunately, and this resurgence is a reminder that infectious diseases are not easily defeated. They're constantly evolving, adapting to our interventions, and finding new ways to thrive.
It's a constant battle. And it underscores the importance of ongoing surveillance, research, and public health efforts to stay ahead of these microbial threats.
Absolutely. We can't afford to be complacent. We need to remain vigilant, invest in research, and develop new strategies to combat syphilis and other emerging infectious diseases.
Well said. Now, as we wrap up this deep dive into syphilis, I want to thank you for sharing your expertise with us. It's been a fascinating journey exploring the biology, history, and societal impact of this intriguing disease.
The pleasure was all mine.
And to our listeners, medical microbiologists like yourselves, we hope you've gained valuable insights from this deep dive. Syphilis is a disease that has challenged us for centuries and continues to do so today. It demands our attention, our expertise, and our commitment to finding innovative solutions to combat its resurgence and achieve global elimination. Until next time, keep exploring the fascinating world of microbes. It's a reminder that infectious diseases are not just biological entities. They're intertwined with social, cultural, and economic factors that shape their impact and our response to them.
Absolutely. And as we navigate the complexities of syphilis in the 21st century, we need to draw upon all the tools at our disposal, from scientific advancements to public health interventions that address the root causes of transmission.
Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to touch on one more critical aspect of syphilis research: the pursuit of a vaccine. I know there's been growing interest in developing a vaccine to prevent this ancient foe, but it's a challenging endeavor, to say the least.
It is. Treponema pallidum presents unique challenges for vaccine development, partly due to its remarkable ability to evade the immune system.
Right. We've talked about its stealthy outer membrane, its limited surface proteins, and its ability to cloak itself in host proteins.
Yeah.
All of those factors make it difficult for our immune system to mount an effective and lasting response.
Exactly. And that's where the ingenuity of vaccine researchers comes in. They're exploring a variety of approaches, from targeting specific outer membrane proteins to developing novel adjuvants that can boost the immune response.
It's exciting to see the progress being made in this area. A vaccine for syphilis would be a game changer, not just for individuals, but for global public health efforts to control this persistent disease.
Absolutely. A vaccine could significantly reduce transmission rates, prevent the devastating consequences of late-stage syphilis, and ultimately help us achieve the goal of global eradication.
It's a lofty goal, but one worth striving for, and I have no doubt that medical microbiologists like yourself will play a crucial role in achieving it. Now, as we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave you with a thought-provoking question, one that reflects the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead in our ongoing battle with syphilis.
I'm all ears.
Knowing the intricate biology of Treponema pallidum, its remarkable ability to adapt and evade our defenses, and the resurgence we're witnessing globally, what innovative approaches can we take to combat this ancient foe and chart a course toward its eventual eradication?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's a question that demands our collective ingenuity, our unwavering commitment to scientific inquiry, and our collaborative spirit to translate those discoveries into effective interventions. Whether it's developing new diagnostic tools, novel treatment strategies, or that elusive vaccine, we need to think outside the box and embrace a multifaceted approach.
Well said. It's a reminder that the fight against infectious diseases is never truly over. It's an ongoing journey of discovery, adaptation, and resilience. And I have no doubt that the medical microbiology community is up to the challenge. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of syphilis. We hope you've gained a deeper appreciation for its complexity, its history, and its enduring relevance in the 21st century.
It's been my pleasure.
Until next time.